Invisible Man. Invisible Man is a novel by Ralph Ellison about an African-American man whose color renders him invisible, published by Random House in 1952. It addresses many of the social and intellectual issues facing African Americans early in the 20th century, including black nationalism, the relationship between black identity and Marxism, and the reformist racial policies of Booker T. Washington, as well as issues of individuality and personal identity. Prologue. I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination, indeed, everything and anything except me. Nor is my invisibility exactly a matter of a biochemical accident to my epidermis. That invisibility to which I refer occurs because of a peculiar disposition of the eyes of those with whom I come in contact. A matter of the construction of their inner eyes, those eyes with which they look through their physical eyes upon reality. I am not complaining, nor am I protesting either. It is sometimes advantageous to be unseen, although it is most often rather wearing on the nerves. Then too, you're constantly being bumped against by those of poor vision. Or again, you often doubt if you really exist. You wonder whether you aren't simply a phantom in other people's minds. Say, a figure in a nightmare which the sleeper tries with all his strength to destroy. It's when you feel like this that, out of resentment, you begin to bump people back. And, let me confess, you feel that way most of the time. You ache with the need to convince yourself that you do exist in the real world, that you're a part of all the sound and anguish, and you strike out with your fists, you curse and you swear to make them recognize you. And, alas, it's seldom successful. One night I accidentally bumped into a man, and perhaps because of the near darkness he saw me and called me an insulting name. I sprang at him, seized his coat lapels and demanded that he apologize. He was a tall blond man, and as my face came close to his he looked insolently out of his blue eyes and cursed me, his breath hot in my face as he struggled. I pulled his chin down sharp upon the crown of my head, butting him as I had seen the West Indians do, and I felt his flesh tear and the blood gush out, and I yelled, "Apologize! Apologize!" But he continued to curse and struggle, and I butted him again and again until he went down heavily, on his knees, profusely bleeding. I kicked him repeatedly, in a frenzy because he still uttered insults though his lips were frothy with blood. Oh yes, I kicked him. And in my outrage I got out my knife and prepared to slit his throat, right there beneath the lamplight in the deserted street, holding him by the collar with one hand, and opening the knife with my teeth, when it occurred to me that the man had not seen me, actually, that he, as far as he knew, was in the midst of a walking nightmare. And I stopped the blade, slicing the air as I pushed him away, letting him fall back to the street. I stared at him hard as the lights of a car stabbed through the darkness. He lay there, moaning on the asphalt, a man almost killed by a phantom. It unnerved me. I was both disgusted and ashamed. I was like a drunken man myself, wavering about on weakened legs. Then I was amused. Something in this man's thick head had sprung out and beaten him within an inch of his life. I began to laugh at his crazy discovery. Would he have awakened at the point of death? Would death himself have freed him for wakeful living? But I didn't linger. I ran away into the dark, laughing so hard I feared I might rupture myself. The next day I saw his picture in the Daily News, beneath a caption stating that he had been mugged. Poor fool, poor blind fool, I thought with sincere compassion, mugged by an invisible man. Most of the time, although I do not choose as I once did to deny the violence of my days by ignoring it, I am not so overtly violent. I remember that I am invisible and walk softly so as not to awaken the sleeping ones. Sometimes it is best not to awaken them. There are few things in the world as dangerous as sleepwalkers. I learned in time though that it is possible to carry on a fight against them without their realizing it. For instance, I have been carrying on a fight with manipulated light and power for some time now. I use their service and pay them nothing at all, and they don't know it. Oh, they suspect that power is being drained off, but they don't know where. All they know is that according to the master meter back there in their power station a hell of a lot of free current is disappearing somewhere into the jungle of Harlem. The joke, of course, is that I don't live in Harlem but in a border area. Several years ago, before I discovered the advantage of being invisible, I went through the routine process of buying service and paying their outrageous rates. But no more. I gave up all that, along with my apartment, and my old way of life, that way based upon the fallacious assumption that I, like other men, was visible. Now, aware of my invisibility, I live rent-free in a building rented strictly to whites, in a section of the basement that was shut off and forgotten during the 19th century, which I discovered when I was trying to escape in the night from Russ the Destroyer. But that's getting too far ahead of the story, almost to the end, although the end is in the beginning and lies far ahead. The point now is that I found a home, or a hole in the ground, as you will. Now don't jump to the conclusion that because I call my home a hole it is damp and cold like a grave. There are cold holes and warm holes. Mine is a warm hole. And remember, a bear retires to his hole for the winter and lives until spring, then he comes strolling out like the Easter chick breaking from its shell. I say all this to assure you that it is incorrect to assume that, because I'm invisible and live in a hole, I am dead. I am neither dead nor in a state of suspended animation. Call me Jack the Bear, for I am in a state of hibernation. My hole is warm and full of light. Yes, full of light. I doubt if there is a brighter spot in all New York than this hole of mine, and I do not exclude Broadway. Or the Empire State Building on a photographer's dream night. But that is taking advantage of you. Those two spots are among the darkest of our whole civilization, pardon me, our whole culture, an important distinction, I've heard, which might sound like a hoax, or a contradiction, but that, by contradiction, I mean, is how the world moves, not like an arrow, but a boomerang. Beware of those who speak of the spiral of history, they are preparing a boomerang. Keep a steel helmet handy. I know, I have been boomeranged across my head so much that I now can see the darkness of lightness. And I love light. Perhaps you'll think it strange that an invisible man should need light, desire light, love light. But maybe it is exactly because I am invisible. Light confirms my reality, gives birth to my form. A beautiful girl once told me of a recurring nightmare in which she lay in the center of a large dark room and felt her face expand until it filled the whole room, becoming a formless mass while her eyes ran in bilious jelly up the chimney. And so it is with me. Without light I am not only invisible, but formless as well, and to be unaware of one's form is to live a death. I myself, after existing some 20 years, did not become alive until I discovered my invisibility. That is why I fight my battle with manipulated light and power. The deeper reason, I mean, it allows me to feel my vital aliveness. I also fight them for taking so much of my money before I learned to protect myself. In my hole in the basement there are exactly 1,369 lights. I've wired the entire ceiling, every inch of it. And not with fluorescent bulbs, but with the older, more expensive to operate kind, the filament type. An act of sabotage, you know. I've already begun to wire the wall. A junk man I know, a man of vision, has supplied me with wire and sockets. Nothing, storm or flood, must get in the way of our need for light and ever more and brighter light. The truth is the light and light is the truth. When I finish all 4 walls, then I'll start on the floor. Just how that will go, I don't know. Yet when you have lived invisible as long as I have you develop a certain ingenuity. I'll solve the problem. And maybe I'll invent a gadget to place my coffee pot on the fire while I lie in bed, and even invent a gadget to warm my bed, like the fellow I saw in one of the picture magazines who made himself a gadget to warm his shoes. Though invisible, I am in the great American tradition of tinkers. That makes me kin to Ford, Edison, and Franklin. Call me, since I have a theory and a concept, a thinker-tinker. Yes, I'll warm my shoes, they need it, they're usually full of holes. I'll do that and more. Now I have one radio phonograph, I plan to have 5. There is a certain acoustical deadness in my hole, and when I have music I want to feel its vibration, not only with my ear but with my whole body. I'd like to hear 5 recordings of Louis Armstrong playing and singing "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue," all at the same time. Sometimes now I listen to Louis while I have my favorite dessert of vanilla ice cream and sloe gin. I pour the red liquid over the white mound, watching it glisten and the vapor rising as Louis bends that military instrument into a beam of lyrical sound. Perhaps I like Louis Armstrong because he's made poetry out of being invisible. I think it must be because he's unaware that he is invisible. And my own grasp of invisibility aids me to understand his music. Once when I asked for a cigarette, some jokers gave me a reefer, which I lighted when I got home and sat listening to my phonograph. It was a strange evening. Invisibility, let me explain, gives one a slightly different sense of time. You're never quite on the beat. Sometimes you're ahead and sometimes behind. Instead of the swift and imperceptible flowing of time, you are aware of its nodes, those points where time stands still or from which it leaps ahead. And you slip into the breaks and look around. That's what you hear vaguely in Louis music. Once I saw a prize fighter boxing a yokel. The fighter was swift and amazingly scientific. His body was one violent flow of rapid rhythmic action. He hit the yokel 100 times while the yokel held up his arms in stunned surprise. But suddenly the yokel, rolling about in the gale of boxing gloves, struck one blow and knocked science, speed and footwork as cold as a well-digger's posterior. The smart money hit the canvas. The long shot got the nod. The yokel had simply stepped inside of his opponent's sense of time. So under the spell of the reefer I discovered a new analytical way of listening to music. The unheard sounds came through, and each melodic line existed of itself, stood out clearly from all the rest, said its piece, and waited patiently for the other voices to speak. That night I found myself hearing not only in time, but in space as well. I not only entered the music but descended, like Dante, into its depths. And beneath the swiftness of the hot tempo there was a slower tempo and a cave, and I entered it and looked around and heard an old woman singing as spiritual as full of Weltschmerz as flamenco, and beneath that lay a still lower level on which I saw a beautiful girl the color of ivory pleading in a voice like my mother's as she stood before a group of slave owners who bid for her naked body, and below that I found a lower level and a more rapid tempo, and I heard someone shout, "Brothers and sisters, my text this morning is the blackness of blackness." And a congregation of voices answered, "That blackness is most black, brother, most black." In the beginning, at the very start, they cried, there was blackness. Preach it. And the sun, Lord, was bloody red. Red. Now black is. The preacher shouted. Bloody. I said black is. Preach it, brother. And black ain't. Red, Lord, red, he said it's red. Amen, brother. Black will get you. Yes, it will. And black won't. Nah, it won't. It do. It do, Lord. And it don't. Hallelujah. It'll put you, glory, glory, oh my Lord, in the whale's belly. Preach it, dear brother. And make you tempt. Good God Almighty. Old Aunt Nellie. Black will make you. Black. Or black will unmake you. Ain't it the truth, Lord? And at that point a voice of trombone timbre screamed at me, get out of here, you fool. Is you ready to commit treason? And I tore myself away, hearing the old singer of spirituals moaning, go curse your God, boy, and die. I stopped and questioned her, Asked her what was wrong. I dearly loved my master, son, she said. You should have hated him, I said. He gave me several sons, she said, and because I loved my sons I learned to love their father though I hated him too. I too have become acquainted with ambivalence, I said. That's why I'm here. What's that? Nothing, a word that doesn't explain it. Why do you moan? I moan this way 'cause he's dead, she said. Then tell me, who is that laughing upstairs? Them's my sons. They glad? Yes, I can understand that too, I said. I laughs too, but I moans too. He promised to set us free but he never could bring hisself to do it. Still I loved him. Loved him? You mean? Oh yes, but one loved something else even more. What more? Freedom. Freedom, I said. Maybe freedom lies in hating. Nah, son, it's in loving. I loved him and give him the poison and he withered away like a frost-bit apple. Them boys would a tore him to pieces with they home-make knives. A mistake was made somewhere, I said, I'm confused. And I wished to say other things, but the laughter upstairs became too loud and moan-like for me and I tried to break out of it, but I couldn't. Just as I was leaving I felt an urgent desire to ask her what freedom was and went back. She sat with her head in her hands, moaning softly, her leather-brown face was filled with sadness. Old woman, what is this freedom you love so well? I asked around a corner of my mind. She looked surprised, then thoughtful, then baffled. I done forgot, son. It's all mixed up. First I think it's one thing, then I think it's another. It gets my head to spinning. I guess now it ain't nothing but knowing how to say what I got up in my head. But it's a hard job, son. Too much has done happened to me in too short a time. It's like I have a fever. Every time I starts to walk my head gets to swirling and I falls down. Or if it ain't that, it's the boys, they gets to laughing and wants to kill up the white folks. They's bitter, that's what they is. But what about freedom? Leave me alone, boy, my head aches. I left her, feeling dizzy myself. I didn't get far. Suddenly one of the sons, a big fellow 6 feet tall, appeared out of nowhere and struck me with his fist. What's the matter, man? I cried. You made Ma cry. But how? I said, dodging a blow. Askin her them questions, that's how. Get outta here and stay. And next time you got questions like that, ask yourself. He held me in a grip like cold stone, his fingers fastening upon my windpipe until I thought I would suffocate before he finally allowed me to go. I stumbled about dazed, the music beating hysterically in my ears. It was dark. My head cleared and I wandered down a dark narrow passage, thinking I heard his footsteps hurrying behind me. I was sore, and into my being had come a profound craving for tranquility, for peace and quiet, a state I felt I could never achieve. For one thing, the trumpet was blaring and the rhythm was too hectic. A tom-tom beating like heart thuds began drowning out the trumpet, filling my ears. I longed for water and I heard it rushing through the cold mains my fingers touched as I felt my way, but I couldn't stop to search because of the footsteps behind me. Hey, Ras, I called. Is it you, destroyer? Reinhardt? No answer, only the rhythmic footsteps behind me. Once I tried crossing the road, but a speeding machine struck me, scraping the skin from my leg as it roared past. Then somehow I came out of it, ascending hastily from this underworld of sound to hear Louis Armstrong innocently asking, "What did I do to be so black and blue?" At first I was afraid. This familiar music had demanded action, the kind of which I was incapable, and yet had I lingered there beneath the surface I might have attempted to act. Nevertheless, I know now that few really listened to this music. I sat on the chair's edge in a soaking sweat, as though each of my 1,369 bulbs had everyone become a Klieg light in an individual setting for a third degree with Ras and Reinhardt in charge. It was exhausting, as though I had held my breath continuously for an hour under the terrifying serenity that comes from days of intense hunger. And yet, It was a strangely satisfying experience for an invisible man to hear the silence of sound. I had discovered unrecognized compulsions of my being, even though I could not answer yes to their promptings. I haven't smoked a reefer since, however, not because they're illegal, but because to see around corners is enough. That is not unusual when you are invisible. But to hear around them is too much, it inhibits action. And despite Brother Jack and all that sad, lost period of the Brotherhood, I believe in nothing if not in action. Please, a definition. A hibernation is a covert preparation for a more overt action. Besides, the drug destroys one's sense of time completely. If that happened, I might forget to dodge some bright morning and some clock would run me down with an orange and yellow streetcar, or a bilious bus. Or I might forget to leave my hole when the moment for action presents itself. Meanwhile I enjoy my life with the compliments of monoplated light and power. Since you never recognize me even when in closest contact with me, and since, no doubt, you'll hardly believe that I exist, it won't matter if you know that I tapped a power line leading into the building and ran it into my hole in the ground. Before that I lived in the darkness into which I was chased, but now I see. I've illuminated the blackness of my invisibility, and vice versa. And so I play the invisible music of my isolation. The last statement doesn't seem just right, does it? But it is. You hear this music simply because music is heard and seldom seen, except by musicians. Could this compulsion to put invisibility down in black and white be thus an urge to make music of invisibility? But I am an orator, a rabble-rouser, am? I was, and perhaps shall be again. Who knows? All sickness is not unto death, neither is invisibility. I can hear you say, what a horrible, irresponsible bastard. And you're right. I leap to agree with you. I am one of the most irresponsible beings that ever lived. Irresponsibility is part of my invisibility, any way you face it, it is a denial. But to whom can I be responsible, and why should I be, when you refuse to see me? And wait until I reveal how truly irresponsible I am. Responsibility rests upon recognition, and recognition is a form of agreement. Take the man whom I almost killed, who was responsible for that near murder. I don't think so, and I refuse it. I won't buy it. You can't give it to me. He bumped me, he insulted me. Shouldn't he, for his own personal safety, have recognized my hysteria, my danger potential? He, let us say, was lost in a dream world. But didn't he control that dream world, which, alas, is only too real, and didn't he rule me out of it? And if he had yelled for a policeman, wouldn't I have been taken for the offending one? Yes, yes, yes. Let me agree with you, I was the irresponsible one, for I should have used my knife to protect the higher interests of society. Someday that kind of foolishness will cause us tragic trouble. All dreamers and sleepwalkers must pay the price, and even the invisible victim is responsible for the fate of all. But I shirked that responsibility, I became too snarled in the incompatible notions that buzzed within my brain. I was a coward. But what did I do to be so blue? Bear with me, Chapter 1. It goes a long way back, some 20 years. All my life I had been looking for something, and everywhere I turned someone tried to tell me what it was. I accepted their answers too, though they were often in contradiction and even self-contradictory. I was not. I was looking for myself and asking everyone except myself questions which I, and only I, could answer. It took me a long time and much painful boomeranging of my expectations to achieve a realization everyone else appears to have been born with, that I am nobody but myself. But first I had to discover that I am an invisible man. And yet I am no freak of nature, nor of history. I was in the cards, other things having been equal, or unequal, 85 years ago. I am not ashamed of my grandparents for having been slaves. I am only ashamed of myself for having at one time been ashamed. About 85 years ago they were told that they were free, united with others of our country in everything pertaining to the common good, and, in everything social, separate like the fingers of the hand. and they believed it. They exulted in it. They stayed in their place, worked hard, and brought up my father to do the same. But my grandfather is the one. He was an odd old guy, my grandfather, and I am told I take after him. It was he who caused the trouble. On his deathbed he called my father to him and said, "Son, after I'm gone I want you to keep up the good fight. I never told you, but our life is a war and I have been a traitor all my born days, a spy in the enemy's country ever since I gave up my gun back in the Reconstruction. Live with your head in the lion's mouth. I want you to overcome 'em with yeses, undermine 'em with grins, agree 'em to death and destruction, let 'em swallow you till they vomit or bust wide open." They thought the old man had gone out of his mind. He had been the meekest of men. The younger children were rushed from the room, the shades drawn and the flame of the lamp turned so low that it sputtered on the wick like the old man's breathing. "Learn it to the young guns," he whispered fiercely, then he died. But my folks were more alarmed over his last words than over his dying. It was as though he had not died at all, his words caused so much anxiety. I was warned emphatically to forget what he had said and, indeed, this is the first time it has been mentioned outside the family circle. It had a tremendous effect upon me, however. I could never be sure of what he meant. Grandfather had been a quiet old man who never made any trouble, yet on his deathbed he had called himself a traitor and a spy, and he had spoken of his meekness as a dangerous activity. It became a constant puzzle which lay unanswered in the back of my mind. And whenever things went well for me I remembered my grandfather and felt guilty and uncomfortable. It was as though I was carrying out his advice in spite of myself. And to make it worse, everyone loved me for it. I was praised by the most lily-white men of the town. I was considered an example of desirable conduct, just as my grandfather had been. And what puzzled me was that the old man had defined it as treachery. When I was praised for my conduct I felt a guilt that in some way I was doing something that was really against the wishes of the white folks, that if they had understood they would have desired me to act just the opposite, that I should have been sulky and mean, and that really would have been what they wanted, even though they were fooled and thought they wanted me to act as I did. It made me afraid that someday they would look upon me as a traitor and I would be lost. Still I was more afraid to act any other way because they didn't like that at all. The old man's words were like a curse. On my graduation day I delivered an oration in which I showed that humility was the secret, indeed, the very essence of progress. Not that I believed this, how could I, remembering my grandfather, I only believed that it worked. It was a great success. Everyone praised me and I was invited to give the speech at a gathering of the town's leading white citizens. It was a triumph for our whole community. It was in the main ballroom of the leading hotel. When I got there I discovered that it was on the occasion of a smoker, and I was told that since I was to be there anyway I might as well take part in the battle royal to be fought by some of my schoolmates as part of the entertainment. The battle royal came first. All of the town's big shots were there in their tuxedos, wolfing down the buffet foods, drinking beer and whiskey and smoking black cigars. It was a large room with a high ceiling. Chairs were arranged in neat rows around three sides of a portable boxing ring. The fourth side was clear, revealing a gleaming space of polished floor. I had some misgivings over the battle royal, by the way. Not from a distaste for fighting, but because I didn't care too much for the other fellows who were to take part. They were tough guys who seemed to have no grandfather's curse worrying their minds. No one could mistake their toughness. And besides, I suspected that fighting a battle royal might detract from the dignity of my speech. In those pre-invisible days I visualized myself as a potential Booker T. Washington. But the other fellows didn't care too much for me either. And there were 9 of them. I felt superior to them in my way, and I didn't like the manner in which we were all crowded together into the servants' elevator. Nor did they like my being there. In fact, as the warmly lighted floors flashed past the elevator we had words over the fact that I, by taking part in the fight, had knocked one of their friends out of a night's work. We were let out of the elevator through a rococo hall into an anteroom and told to get into our fighting togs. Each of us was issued a pair of boxing gloves and ushered out into the big mirrored hall, which we entered looking cautiously about us and whispering, lest we might accidentally be heard above the noise of the room. It was foggy with cigar smoke. And already the whiskey was taking effect. I was shocked to see some of the most important men of the town quite tipsy. They were all there, bankers, lawyers, judges, doctors, fire chiefs, teachers, merchants. Even one of the more fashionable pastors. Something we could not see was going on up front. A clarinet was vibrating sensuously and the men were standing up and moving eagerly forward. We were a small tight group, clustered together, our bare upper bodies touching and shining with anticipatory sweat, while up front the big shots were becoming increasingly excited over something we still could not see. Suddenly I heard the school superintendent, who had told me to come, yell, "Bring up the shines, gentlemen. Bring up the little shines." We were rushed up to the front of the ballroom, where it smelled even more strongly of tobacco and whiskey. Then we were pushed into place. I almost wet my pants. A sea of faces, some hostile, some amused, ringed around us, and in the center, facing us, stood a magnificent blonde, stark naked. There was dead silence. I felt a blast of cold air chill me. I tried to back away, but they were behind me and around me. Some of the boys stood with lowered heads, trembling. I felt a wave of irrational guilt and fear. My teeth chattered, my skin turned to goose flesh, my knees knocked. Yet I was strongly attracted and looked in spite of myself. Had the price of looking been blindness, I would have looked. The hair was yellow like that of a circus Cupid doll, the face heavily powdered and rouged, as though to form an abstract mask, the eyes hollow and smeared a cool blue, the color of a baboon's butt. I felt a desire to spit upon her as my eyes brushed slowly over her body. Her breasts were firm and round as the domes of East Indian temples, and I stood so close as to see the fine skin texture and beads of pearly perspiration glistening like dew around the pink and erected buds of her nipples. I wanted at one and the same time to run from the room, to sink through the floor, or go to her and cover her from my eyes and the eyes of the others with my body, to feel the soft thighs, to caress her and destroy her, to love her and murder her, to hide from her, and yet to stroke where below the small American flag tattooed upon her belly her thighs formed a capital V. I had a notion that of all in the room she saw only me with her impersonal eyes. And then she began to dance, a slow sensuous movement, the smoke of 100 cigars clinging to her like the thinnest of veils. She seemed like a fair bird girl girdled in veils calling to me from the angry surface of some grey and threatening sea. I was transported. Then I became aware of the clarinet playing and the big shots yelling at us. Some threatened us if we looked and others if we did not. On my right I saw one boy faint. And now a man grabbed a silver pitcher from a table and stepped close as he dashed ice water upon him and stood him up and forced two of us to support him as his head hung and moans issued from his thick bluish lips. Another boy began to plead to go home. He was the largest of the group, wearing dark red fighting trunks much too small to conceal the erection which projected from him as though in answer to the insinuating low-registered moaning of the clarinet. He tried to hide himself with his boxing gloves. And all the while the blonde continued dancing, smiling faintly at the big shots who watched her with fascination, and faintly smiling at our fear. I noticed a certain merchant who followed her hungrily, his lips loose and drooling. He was a large man who wore diamond studs in a shirt front which swelled with the ample paunch underneath. And each time the blonde swayed her undulating hips he ran his hand through the thin hair of his bald head and, with his arms upheld, his posture clumsy like that of an intoxicated panda, wound his belly in a slow and obscene grind. This creature was completely hypnotized. The music had quickened. As the dancer flung herself about with a detached expression on her face, the men began reaching out to touch her. I could see their beefy fingers sink into the soft flesh. Some of the others tried to stop them and she began to move around the floor in graceful circles, as they gave chase, slipping and sliding over the polished floor. It was mad. Chairs went crashing, drinks were spilt, as they ran laughing and howling after her. They caught her just as she reached a door, raised her from the floor, and tossed her as college boys are tossed at a hazing, and above her red, fixed smiling lips I saw the terror and disgust in her eyes, almost like my own terror and that which I saw in some of the other boys. As I watched, they tossed her twice and her soft breasts seemed to flatten against the air and her legs flung wildly as she spun. Some of the more sober ones helped her to escape. And I started off the floor, heading for the anteroom with the rest of the boys. Some were still crying and in hysteria. But as we tried to leave we were stopped and ordered to get into the ring. There was nothing to do but what we were told. All 10 of us climbed under the ropes and allowed ourselves to be blindfolded with broad bands of white cloth. One of the men seemed to feel a bit sympathetic and tried to cheer us up as we stood with our backs against the ropes. Some of us tried to grin. "See that boy over there?" one of the men said. "I want you to run across at the bell and give it to him right in the belly. If you don't get him, I'm going to get you. I don't like his looks." Each of us was told the same. The blindfolds were put on. Yet even then I had been going over my speech. In my mind each word was as bright as flame. I felt the cloth pressed into place, and frowned so that it would be loosened when I relaxed. But now I felt a sudden fit of blind terror. I was unused to darkness. It was as though I had suddenly found myself in a dark room filled with poisonous cottonmouths. I could hear the bleary voices yelling insistently for the battle royal to begin. "Get going in there. Let me at that big nigger." I strained to pick up the school superintendent's voice, as though to squeeze some security out of that slightly more familiar sound. "Let me at those black son savages." Someone yelled. "No, Jackson, no." Another voice yelled. "Here, somebody, help me hold Jack. I want to get at that ginger-colored nigger. Tear him limb from limb," the first voice yelled. I stood against the ropes trembling. For in those days I was what they called ginger-colored, and he sounded as though he might crunch me between his teeth like a crisp ginger cookie. Quite a struggle was going on. Chairs were being kicked about and I could hear voices grunting as with a terrific effort. I wanted to see more desperately than ever before. But the blindfold was as tight as a thick skin puckering scab, and when I raised my gloved hands to push the layers of white aside a voice yelled, "Oh, no you don't, black bastard. Leave that alone. Ring the bell before Jackson kills him a coon." Someone boomed in the sudden silence. And I heard the bell clang and the sound of the feet scuffling forward. A glove smacked against my head. I pivoted, striking out stiffly as someone went past, and felt the jar ripple along the length of my arm to my shoulder. Then it seemed as though all 9 of the boys had turned upon me at once. Blows pounded me from all sides while I struck out as best I could. So many blows landed upon me that I wondered if I were not the only blindfolded fighter in the ring, or if the man called Jackson hadn't succeeded in getting me after all. Blindfolded, I could no longer control my motions. I had no dignity. I stumbled about like a baby or a drunken man. The smoke had become thicker and with each new blow it seemed to sear and further restrict my lungs. My saliva became like hot bitter glue. A glove connected with my head, filling my mouth with warm blood. It was everywhere. I could not tell if the moisture I felt upon my body was sweat or blood. A blow landed hard against the nape of my neck. I felt myself going over, my head hitting the floor. Streaks of blue light filled the black world behind the blindfold. I lay prone, pretending that I was knocked out, but felt myself seized by hands and yanked to my feet. "Get going, black boy. Mix it up." My arms were like lead, my head smarting from blows. I managed to feel my way to the ropes and held on, trying to catch my breath. A glove landed in my midsection and I went over again, feeling as though the smoke had become a knife jabbed into my guts. Pushed this way and that by the legs milling around me, I finally pulled erect and discovered that I could see the black, sweat-washed forms weaving in the smoky blue atmosphere like drunken dancers weaving to the rapid drum-like thuds of blows. Everyone fought hysterically. It was complete anarchy. Everybody fought everybody else. No group fought together for long. 2, 3, 4, fought one, then turned to fight each other, were themselves attacked. Blows landed below the belt and in the kidney, with the gloves open as well as closed, and with my partly open now there was not so much terror. I moved carefully, avoiding blows, although not too many to attract attention, fighting from group to group. The boys groped about like blind, cautious crabs crouching to protect their midsections, their heads pulled in short against their shoulders, their arms stretched nervously before them, with their fists testing the smoke-filled air like the knobbed feelers of hypersensitive snails. In one corner I glimpsed a boy violently punching the air and heard him scream in pain as he smashed his hand against a ring post. For a second I saw him bent over holding his hand, then going down as a blow caught his unprotected head. I played one group against the other, slipping in and throwing a punch then stepping out of range while pushing the others into the melee to take the blows blindly aimed at me. The smoke was agonizing and there were no rounds, no bells at 3-minute intervals to relieve our exhaustion. The room spun round me, a swirl of lights, smoke, sweating bodies surrounded by tense white faces. I bled from both nose and mouth, the blood spattering upon my chest. The men kept yelling, "Slug him, black boy. Knock his guts out. Uppercut him. Kill him. Kill that big boy." Taking a fake fall, I saw a boy going down heavily beside me as though we were felled by a single blow, saw a sneaker-clad foot shoot into his groin as the two who had knocked him down stumbled upon him. I rolled out of range, feeling a twinge of nausea. The harder we fought the more threatening the men became. And yet, I had begun to worry about my speech again. How would it go? Would they recognize my ability? What would they give me? I was fighting automatically when suddenly I noticed that one after another of the boys was leaving the ring. I was surprised, filled with panic, as though I had been left alone with an unknown danger. Then I understood. The boys had arranged it among themselves. It was the custom for the two men left in the ring to slug it out for the winner's prize. I discovered this too late. When the bell sounded, two men in tuxedos leaped into the ring and removed the blindfold. I found myself facing Tatlock, the biggest of the gang. I felt sick at my stomach. Hardly had the bell stopped ringing in my ears than it clanged again and I saw him moving swiftly toward me. Thinking of nothing else to do, I hit him smash on the nose. He kept coming, bringing the rank sharp violence of stale sweat. His face was a black blank of a face, only his eyes alive, with hate of me and aglow with a feverish terror from what had happened to us all. I became anxious. I wanted to deliver my speech and he came at me as though he meant to beat it out of me. I smashed him again and again, taking his blows as they came. Then on a sudden impulse I struck him lightly and as we clinched, I whispered, "Fake like I knocked you out, you can have the prize." "I'll break your behind," he whispered hoarsely. "For them. For me, son of a bitch." They were yelling for us to break it up and Tatlock spun me half around with a blow, and as a juggled camera sweeps in a reeling scene, I saw the howling red faces crouching tense beneath the cloud of blue-gray smoke. For a moment the world wavered, unraveled, flowed, then my head cleared and Tatlock bounced before me. That fluttering shadow before my eyes was his jabbing left hand. Then falling forward, my head against his damp shoulder, I whispered, "I'll make it $5 more. Go to hell." But his muscles relaxed a trifle beneath my pressure and I breathed. "7? Give it to your ma," he said, ripping me beneath the heart. And while I still held him I butted him and moved away. I felt myself bombarded with punches. I fought back with hopeless desperation. I wanted to deliver my speech more than anything else in the world, felt that only these men could judge truly my ability, and now this stupid clown was ruining my chances. I began fighting carefully now, moving in to punch him and out again with my greater speed. A lucky blow to his chin and I had him going too, until I heard a loud voice yell, "I got my money on the big boy." Hearing this, I almost dropped my guard. I was confused. Should I try to win against the voice out there? Would not this go against my speech, and was not this a moment for humility, for non-resistance? A blow to my head as I danced about sent my right eye popping like a jack-in-the-box and settled my dilemma. The room went red as I fell. It was a dream fall, my body languid and fastidious as to where to land, until the floor became impatient and smashed up to meet me. A moment later I came to. An hypnotic voice said 5 emphatically. And I lay there, hazily watching a dark red spot of my own blood shaping itself into a butterfly, glistening and soaking into the soiled gray world of the canvas. When the voice drawled 10 I was lifted up and dragged to a chair. I sat dazed. My eye pained and swelled with each throb of my pounding heart and I wondered if now I would be allowed to speak. I was wringing wet, my mouth still bleeding. We were grouped along the wall now. The other boys ignored me as they congratulated Tatlock and speculated as to how much they would be paid. One boy whimpered over his smashed hand. Looking up front, I saw attendants in white jackets rolling the portable ring away and placing a small square rug in the vacant space surrounded by chairs. Perhaps, I thought, I will stand on the rug to deliver my speech. Then the MC called to us, "Come on up here boys and get your money." We ran forward to where the men laughed and talked in their chairs, waiting. Everyone seemed friendly now. "There it is on the rug," the man said. I saw the rug covered with coins of all dimensions and a few crumpled bills. But what excited me, scattered here and there, were the gold pieces. "Boys, it's all yours," the man said. "You get all you grab." "That's right, Sambo," a blond man said, winking at me confidentially. I trembled with excitement, forgetting my pain. I would get the gold and the bills, I thought. I would use both hands. I would throw my body against the boys nearest me to block them from the gold. "Get down around the rug now," the man commanded, "and don't anyone touch it until I give the signal." "This ought to be good," I heard. As told, we got around the square rug on our knees. Slowly the man raised his freckled hand as we followed it upward with our eyes. I heard, "These niggers look like they're about to pray." Then, "Ready," the man said. "Go." I lunged for a yellow coin lying on the blue design of the carpet, touching it and sending a surprised shriek to join those rising around me. I tried frantically to remove my hand but could not let go. A hot, violent force tore through my body, shaking me like a wet rat. The rug was electrified. The hair bristled up on my head as I shook myself free. My muscles jumped, my nerves jangled, writhed. But I saw that this was not stopping the other boys. Laughing in fear and embarrassment, some were holding back and scooping up the coins knocked off by the painful contortions of the others. The men roared above us as we struggled. "Pick it up, goddammit, pick it up." Someone called like a bass-voiced parrot. "Go on, get it." I crawled rapidly around the floor, picking up the coins, trying to avoid the coppers and to get greenbacks and the gold. Ignoring the shock by laughing, as I brushed the coins off quickly, I discovered that I could contain the electricity, a contradiction, but it works. Then the men began to push us onto the rug. Laughing embarrassedly, we struggled out of their hands and kept after the coins. We were all wet and slippery and hard to hold. Suddenly I saw a boy lifted into the air, glistening with sweat like a circus seal, and dropped, his wet back landing flush upon the charged rug, heard him yell and saw him literally dance upon his back, elbows beating a frenzied tattoo upon the floor, his muscles twitching like the flesh of a horse stung by many flies. When he finally rolled off, his face was gray and no one stopped him when he ran from the floor amid booming laughter. "Get the money," the MC called. "That's good hard American cash." And we snatched and grabbed. I was careful not to come too close to the rug now, and when I felt the hot whiskey breath descend upon me like a cloud of foul air I reached out and grabbed the leg of a chair. It was occupied and I held on desperately. "Lego, Nigger. Lego. The huge face wavered down to mine as he tried to push me free. But my body was slippery and he was too drunk. It was Mr. Colkert, who owned a chain of movie houses and entertainment palaces. Each time he grabbed me I slipped out of his hands. It became a real struggle. I feared the rug more than I did the drunk, so I held on, surprising myself for a moment by trying to topple him upon the rug. It was such an enormous idea that I found myself actually carrying it out. I tried not to be obvious, yet when I grabbed his leg, trying to tumble him out of the chair, he raised up roaring with laughter, and, looking at me with soberness dead in the eye, kicked me viciously in the chest. The chair leg flew out of my hand and I felt myself going and rolled. It was as though I had rolled through a bed of hot coals. It seemed a whole century would pass before I would roll free, a century in which I was seared through the deepest levels of my body to the fearful breath within me, and the breath seared and heated to the point of explosion. It'll all be over in a flash, I thought as I rolled clear. It'll all be over in a flash. But not yet. The men on the other side were waiting, red faces swollen as though from apoplexy as they bent forward in their chairs. Seeing their fingers coming toward me, I rolled away as a fumbled football rolls off the receiver's fingertips, back into the coals. That time I luckily sent the rug sliding out of place and heard the coins ringing against the floor and the boys scuffling to pick them up and the MC calling, "All right, boys, that's all. Go get dressed and get your money." I was limp as a dish rag. My back felt as though it had been beaten with wires. When we had dressed, the MC came in and gave us each $5, except Tatlock, who got 10 for being last in the ring. Then he told us to leave. I was not to get a chance to deliver my speech, I thought. I was going out into the dim alley in despair when I was stopped and told to go back. I returned to the ballroom, where the men were pushing back their chairs and gathering in groups to talk. The MC knocked on a table for quiet. "Gentlemen," he said, "we almost forgot an important part of the program. A most serious part, gentlemen. This boy was brought here to deliver a speech which he made at his graduation yesterday. Bravo! I'm told that he is the smartest boy we've got out there in Greenwood. I'm told that he knows more big words than a pocket-sized dictionary." Much applause and laughter. "So now, gentlemen, I want you to give him your attention." There was still laughter as I faced them, my mouth dry, my eye throbbing. I began slowly, but evidently my throat was tense, because they began shouting, "Louder! Louder! We of the younger generation extol the wisdom of that great leader and educator," I shouted. "Who first spoke these flaming words of wisdom? A ship lost at sea for many days suddenly sighted a friendly vessel. From the mast of the unfortunate vessel was seen a signal, 'Water, water, we die of thirst.' The answer from the friendly vessel came back, 'Cast down your bucket where you are.' The captain of the distressed vessel, at last heeding the injunction, cast down his bucket, and it came up full of fresh sparkling water from the mouth of the Amazon River. And like him I say, and in his words, to those of my race who depend upon bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the southern white man, who is his next-door neighbor, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are, cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded." I spoke automatically and with such fervor that I did not realize that the men were still talking and laughing until my dry mouth, filling up with blood from the cut, almost strangled me. I coughed, wanting to stop and go to one of the tall brass, sand-filled spittoons to relieve myself, but a few of the men, especially the superintendent, were listening and I was afraid. So I gulped it down, blood, saliva and all, and continued. What powers of endurance I had during those days! What enthusiasm! What a belief in the rightness of things! I spoke even louder in spite of the pain. But still they talked and still they laughed, as though deaf with cotton in dirty ears. So I spoke with greater emotional emphasis. I closed my ears and swallowed blood until I was nauseated. The speech seemed 100 times as long as before, but I could not leave out a single word. All had to be said, each memorized nuance considered, rendered. Nor was that all. Whenever I uttered a word of 3 or more syllables, a group of voices would yell for me to repeat it. I used the phrase social responsibility and they yelled, "What's that word you say, boy?" "Social responsibility," I said. "What?" "Social." Louder. "Responsibility." More. Repeat, civility. The room filled with the uproar of laughter until, no doubt, distracted by having to gulp down my blood, I made a mistake and yelled a phrase I had often seen denounced in newspaper editorials, heard debated in private. "Social." "What?" they yelled. "Equality." The laughter hung smoke-like in the sudden stillness. I opened my eyes, puzzled. Sounds of displeasure filled the room. The MC rushed forward. They shouted hostile phrases at me. But I did not understand. A small dry-mustached man in the front row blared out, "Say that slowly, son." "What, sir?" "What you just said." "Social responsibility, sir," I said. "You weren't being smart, were you, boy?" he said, not unkindly. "No, sir." "You sure that about equality was a mistake?" "Oh, yes, sir," I said. I was swallowing blood. "Well, you had better speak more slowly so we can understand. We mean to do right by you, but you've got to know your place at all times." "All right, now, go on with your speech." I was afraid. I wanted to leave, but I wanted also to speak, and I was afraid they'd snatch me down. "Thank you, sir," I said, beginning where I had left off, and having them ignore me as before. Yet when I finished there was a thunderous applause. I was surprised to see the superintendent come forth with a package wrapped in white tissue paper, and, gesturing for quiet, address the men. "Gentlemen, you see that I did not overpraise this boy. He makes a good speech and someday he'll lead his people in the proper paths. And I don't have to tell you that that is important in these days and times. This is a good, smart boy, and so to encourage him in the right direction, in the name of the Board of Education I wish to present him a prize in the form of this." He paused, removing the tissue paper and revealing a gleaming calfskin briefcase. "In the form of this first-class article from Shad Whitmore's shop." "Boy," he said, addressing me, "take this prize and keep it well. Consider it a badge of office. Prize it. Keep developing as you are, and someday it will be filled with important papers that will help shape the destiny of your people." I was so moved that I could hardly express my thanks. A rope of bloody saliva forming a shape like an undiscovered continent drooled upon the leather, and I wiped it quickly away. I felt an importance that I had never dreamed. "Open it and see what's inside," I was told. My fingers tremble. I complied, smelling the fresh leather and finding an official-looking document inside. It was a scholarship to the State College for Negroes. My eyes filled with tears and I ran awkwardly off the floor. I was overjoyed. I did not even mind when I discovered that the gold pieces I had scrambled for were brass pocket tokens advertising a certain make of automobile. When I reached home everyone was excited. Next day the neighbors came to congratulate me. I even felt safe from grandfather, whose deathbed curse usually spoiled my triumphs. I stood beneath his photograph with my briefcase in hand and smiled triumphantly into his stolid black peasant's face. It was a face that fascinated me. The eyes seemed to follow everywhere I went. That night I dreamed I was at a circus with him and that he refused to laugh at the clowns no matter what they did. Then later he told me to open my briefcase and read what was inside, and I did, finding an official envelope stamped with the state seal, and inside the envelope I found another and another, endlessly, and I thought I would fall of weariness. "Them's years," he said. "Now open that one." And I did, and in it I found an engraved document containing a short message in letters of gold. "Read it," my grandfather said. Out loud. "To whom it may concern," I intoned. "Keep this nigger boy running." I awoke with the old man's laughter ringing in my ears. It was a dream I was to remember and dream again for many years after. But at that time I had no insight into its meaning. First I had to attend college, Chapter 2. It was a beautiful college. The buildings were old and covered with vines, and the roads gracefully winding, lined with hedges and wild roses that dazzled the eyes in the summer sun. Honeysuckle and purple wisteria hung heavy from the trees, and white magnolias mixed with their scents in the bee-humming air. I've recalled it often, here in my hole, how the grass turned green in the springtime, and how the mockingbirds fluttered their tails and sang, how the moon shone down on the buildings, how the bell in the chapel tower rang out the precious short-lived hours, how the girls in bright summer dresses promenaded the grassy lawn. Many times, here at night, I've closed my eyes and walked along the forbidden road that winds past the girls' dormitories, past the hall with the clock in the tower, its windows warmly aglow, on down past the small white home economics practice cottage, whiter still in the moonlight, and on down the road with its sloping and turning, paralleling the black powerhouse with its engines droning earth-shaking rhythms in the dark, its windows red from the glow of the furnace, onto where the road became a bridge over a dry riverbed, tangled with brush and clinging vines, the bridge of rustic logs, made for trysting, but virginal and untested by lovers, on up the road, past the buildings, with the southern verandas half a city block long, to the sudden forking, barren of buildings, birds, or grass, where the road turned off to the insane asylum. I always come this far and open my eyes. The spell breaks and I try to re-see the rabbits, so tame through having never been hunted, that played in the hedges and along the road. And I see the purple and silver of thistle growing between the broken glass and sun-heated stones, the ants moving nervously in single file, and I turn and retrace my steps and come back to the winding road past the hospital, where at night in certain wards the gay student nurses dispensed a far more precious thing than pills to lucky boys in the know, and I come to a stop at the chapel. And then it is suddenly winter, with the moon high above and the chimes in the steeple ringing and a sonorous choir of trombones rendering a Christmas carol, and over all is a quietness and an ache as though all the world were loneliness. And I stand and listen beneath the high-hung moon, hearing a mighty fortress is our God, majestically mellow on 4 trombones, and then the organ. The sound floats over all, clear like the night, liquid, serene, and lonely. And I stand as for an answer and see in my mind's eye the cabins surrounded by empty fields beyond red clay roads, and beyond a certain road a river, sluggish and covered with algae more yellow than green in its stagnant stillness, past more empty fields, to the sun-shrunk shacks at the railroad crossing where the disabled veterans visited the whores, hobbling down the tracks on crutches and canes, sometimes pushing the legless, thighless one in a red wheelchair. And sometimes I listen to hear if music reaches that far, but recall only the drunken laughter of sad, sad whores. And I stand in the circle where 3 roads converge near the statue, where we drilled 4 abreast down the smooth asphalt and pivoted and entered the chapel on Sundays, our uniforms pressed, shoes shined, minds laced up, eyes blind like those of robots to visitors and officials on the low, whitewashed reviewing stand. It's so long ago and far away that here in my invisibility I wonder if it happened at all. Then in my mind's eye I see the bronze statue of the college founder, the cold father symbol, his hands outstretched in the breathtaking gesture of lifting a veil that flutters in hard, metallic folds above the face of a kneeling slave, and I am standing puzzled, unable to decide whether the veil is really being lifted, or lowered more firmly in place, whether I am witnessing a revelation or a more efficient blinding. And as I gaze, there is a rustle of wings and I see a flock of starlings flighting before me, and, when I look again, the bronze face, whose empty eyes look upon a world I have never seen, runs with liquid chalk, creating another ambiguity to puzzle my groping mind. Why is a bird-soiled statue more commanding than one that is clean? Oh, long green stretch of campus, oh, quiet songs at dusk, oh, moon that kissed the steeple and flooded the perfumed nights, oh, bugle that called in the morning, oh, drum that marched us militarily at noon. What was real, what solid, what more than a pleasant, time-killing dream? For how could it have been real if now I am invisible? If real, why is it that I can recall in all that island of greenness no fountain but one that was broken, corroded and dry? And why does no rain fall through my recollections, sound through my memories, soak through the hard dry crust of the still so recent past? Why do I recall, instead of the odor of seed bursting in springtime, only the yellow contents of the cistern spread over the lawn's dead grass? Why? And how? How and why? The grass did grow and the green leaves appeared on the trees and filled the avenues with shadow and shade as sure as the millionaires descended from the north on Founders' Day each spring. And how they arrived. Came smiling, inspecting, encouraging, conversing in whispers, speech-making into the wide-open ears of our black and yellow faces, and each leaving a sizable check as he departed. I'm convinced it was the product of a subtle magic, the alchemy of moonlight, the school of flower-studded wasteland, the rocks sunken, the dry winds hidden, the lost crickets chirping to yellow butterflies. And oh, those multimillionaires. They were all such a part of that other life that's dead that I can't remember them all. Time was as I was, but neither that time nor that I are anymore, but this one I remember. Near the end of my junior year I drove for him during the week he was on the campus. A face pink like St. Nicholas, topped with a shock of silk white hair. An easy, informal manner, even with me. A Bostonian, smoker of cigars, teller of polite Negro stories, shrewd banker, skilled scientist, director, philanthropist, 40 years a bearer of the white man's burden, and for 60 a symbol of the great traditions. We were driving, the powerful motor purring and filling me with pride and anxiety. The car smelled of mints and cigar smoke. Students looked up and smiled in recognition as we rolled slowly past. I had just come from dinner and in bending forward to suppress a belch, I accidentally pressed the button on the wheel and the belch became a loud and shattering blast of the horn. Folks on the road turned and stared. "I'm awfully sorry, sir," I said, worried lest he report me to Dr. Bledsoe, the president, who would refuse to allow me to drive again. "Perfectly all right. Perfectly. Where shall I drive you, sir? Let me see." Through the rear-view mirror I could see him studying a wafer-thin watch, replacing it in the pocket of his checked waistcoat. His shirt was soft silk, set off with a blue and white polka-dotted bow tie. His manner was aristocratic, his movements dapper and suave. "It's early to go in for the next session," he said. "Suppose you just drive. Anywhere you like. Have you seen all the campus, sir?" "Yes, I think so. I was one of the original founders, you know." "Gee. I didn't know that, sir. Then I'll have to try some of the roads." Of course I knew he was a founder, but I knew also that it was advantageous to flatter rich white folks. Perhaps he'd give me a large tip, or a suit, or a scholarship next year. "Anywhere else you like. The campus is part of my life and I know my life rather well." "Yes, sir." He was still smiling. In a moment the green campus with its vine-covered buildings was behind us. The car bounded over the road. How was the campus part of his life, I wondered. And how did one learn his life rather well? "Young man, you're part of a wonderful institution. It is a great dream become reality." "Yes, sir," I said. "I feel as lucky to be connected with it as you no doubt do yourself. I came here years ago, when all your beautiful campus was barren ground. There were no trees, no flowers, no fertile farmland. That was years ago before you were born." I listened with fascination, my eyes glued to the white line dividing the highway as my thoughts attempted to sweep back to the times of which he spoke. "Even your parents were young? Slavery was just recently passed. Your people did not know in what direction to turn and, I must confess, many of mine didn't know in what direction they should turn either. But your great founder did. He was my friend and I believed in his vision. So much so, that sometimes I don't know whether it was his vision or mine." He chuckled softly, wrinkles forming at the corners of his eyes. "But of course it was his, I only assisted. I came down with him to see the barren land and did what I could to render assistance. And it has been my pleasant fate to return each spring and observe the changes that the years have wrought. That has been more pleasant and satisfying to me than my own work. It has been a pleasant fate, indeed. His voice was mellow and loaded with more meaning than I could fathom. As I drove, faded and yellowed pictures of the school's early days displayed in the library flashed across the screen of my mind, coming fitfully and fragmentarily to life. Photographs of men and women in wagons drawn by mule teams and oxen, dressed in black, dusty clothing, people who seemed almost without individuality, a black mob that seemed to be waiting, looking with blank faces, and among them the inevitable collection of white men and women in smiles, clear of features, striking, elegant and confident. Until now, and although I could recognize the founder and Dr. Bledsoe among them, the figures in the photographs had never seemed actually to have been alive, but were more like signs or symbols one found on the last pages of the dictionary. But now I felt that I was sharing in a great work and, with the car leaping leisurely beneath the pressure of my foot, I identified myself with the rich man reminiscing on the rear seat. "A pleasant fate," he repeated, "and I hope yours will be as pleasant." "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir," I said, pleased that he wished something pleasant for me. But at the same time I was puzzled. How could anyone's fate be pleasant? I had always thought of it as something painful. No one I knew spoke of it as pleasant, not even Woodridge, who made us read Greek plays. We were beyond the farthest extension of the school-owned lands now, and I suddenly decided to turn off the highway, down a road that seemed unfamiliar. There were no trees and the air was brilliant. Far down the road the sun glared cruelly against a tin sign nailed to a barn. A lone figure bending over a hoe on the hillside raised up wearily and waved, more a shadow against the skyline than a man. "How far have we come?" I heard over my shoulder. "Just about a mile, sir." "I don't remember this section," he said. I didn't answer. I was thinking of the first person who'd mentioned anything like fate in my presence, my grandfather. There had been nothing pleasant about it and I had tried to forget it. Now, riding here in the powerful car with this white man who was so pleased with what he called his fate, I felt a sense of dread. My grandfather would have called this treachery and I could not understand in just what way it was. Suddenly I grew guilty at the realization that the white man might have thought so too. What would he have thought? Did he know that Negroes like my grandfather had been freed during those days just before the college had been founded? As we came to a side road I saw a team of oxen hitched to a broken-down wagon, the ragged driver dozing on the seat beneath the shade of a clump of trees. "Did you see that, sir?" I asked over my shoulder. "What was it?" "The ox team, sir." "Oh. No, I can't see it for the trees," he said looking back. "It's good timber." "I'm sorry, sir." "Shall I turn back?" "No, it isn't much," he said. "Go on." I drove on, remembering the lean, hungry face of the sleeping man. He was the kind of white man I feared. The brown fields swept out to the horizon. A flock of birds dipped down, circled, swung up and out as though linked by invisible strings. Waves of heat danced above the engine hood. The tires sang over the highway. Finally I overcame my timidity and asked him, "Sir, why did you become interested in the school?" "I think," he said, thoughtfully, raising his voice, "it was because I felt even as a young man that your people were somehow closely connected with my destiny. Do you understand?" "Not so clearly, sir," I said, ashamed to admit it. "You have studied Emerson, haven't you?" "Emerson, sir?" "Ralph Waldo Emerson." I was embarrassed because I hadn't. "Not yet, sir. We haven't come to him yet." "No?" he said with a note of surprise. "Well, never mind. I am a New Englander, like Emerson. You must learn about him, for he was important to your people. He had a hand in your destiny." "Yes, perhaps that is what I mean. I had a feeling that your people were somehow connected with my destiny. That what happened to you was connected with what would happen to me." I slowed the car, trying to understand. Through the glass I saw him gazing at the long ash of his cigar, holding it delicately in his slender, manicured fingers. Yes, you are my fate, young man. Only you can tell me what it really is. Do you understand? I think I do, sir. I mean that upon you depends the outcome of the years I have spent in helping your school. That has been my life's work, not my banking or my researches, but my first-hand organizing of human life. I saw him now, leaning toward the front seat, speaking with an intensity which had not been there before. It was hard not to turn my eyes from the highway and face him. There is another reason, a reason more important, more passionate and, yes, even more sacred than all the others, he said, no longer seeming to see me, but speaking to himself alone. Yes, even more sacred than all the others. A girl, my daughter. She was a being more rare, more beautiful, purer, more perfect and more delicate than the wildest dream of a poet. I could never believe her to be my own flesh and blood. Her beauty was a wellspring of purest water of life, and to look upon her was to drink and drink and drink again. She was rare, a perfect creation, a work of purest heart. A delicate flower that bloomed in the liquid light of the moon. A nature not of this world, a personality like that of some biblical maiden, gracious and queenly. I found it difficult to believe her my own. Suddenly he fumbled in his vest pocket and thrust something over the back of the seat, surprising me. Here, young man, you owe much of your good fortune in attending such a school to her. I looked upon the tinted miniature framed in engraved platinum. I almost dropped it. A young woman of delicate, dreamy features looked up at me. She was very beautiful, I thought at the time, so beautiful that I did not know whether I should express admiration to the extent I felt it or merely act polite. And yet I seemed to remember her, or someone like her, in the past. I know now that it was the flowing costume of soft, flimsy material that made for the effect, today, dressed in one of the smart, well-tailored, angular, sterile, streamlined, engine-turned, air-conditioned modern outfits you see in the women's magazines. She would appear as ordinary as an expensive piece of machine-tooled jewelry and just as lifeless. Then, however, I shared something of his enthusiasm. She was too pure for life, he said sadly, too pure and too good and too beautiful. We were sailing together, touring the world, just she and I, when she became ill in Italy. I thought little of it at the time and we continued across the Alps. When we reached Munich she was already fading away. While we were attending an embassy party she collapsed. The best medical science in the world could not save her. It was a lonely return, a bitter voyage. I have never recovered. I have never forgiven myself. Everything I've done since her passing has been a monument to her memory. He became silent, looking with his blue eyes far beyond the field stretching away in the sun. I returned the miniature, wondering what in the world had made him open his heart to me. That was something I never did. It was dangerous. First, it was dangerous if you felt like that about anything, because then you'd never get it or something or someone would take it away from you. Then it was dangerous because nobody would understand you and they'd only laugh and think you were crazy. So you see, young man, you're involved in my life quite intimately, even though you've never seen me before. You're bound to a great dream and to a beautiful monument. If you become a good farmer, a chef, a preacher, doctor, singer, mechanic, whatever you become, and even if you fail, you are my fate. And you must write me and tell me the outcome. I was relieved to see him smiling through the mirror. My feelings were mixed. Was he kidding me? Was he talking to me like someone in a book just to see how I would take it? Or could it be, I was almost afraid to think, that this rich man was just the tiniest bit crazy? How could I tell him his fate? He raised his head and our eyes met for an instant in the glass, then I lowered mine to the blazing white line that divided the highway. The trees along the road were thick and tall. We took a curve. Flocks of quail sailed up and over a field, brown, sailing down, blending. Will you promise to tell me my fate? I heard. Sir? Will you? Right now, sir? I asked with embarrassment. It is up to you. Now, if you like. I was silent. His voice was serious, demanding. I could think of no reply. The motor purred. An insect crushed itself against the windshield, leaving a yellow, mucus smear. I don't know now, sir. This is only my junior year. But you'll tell me when you know? I'll try, sir. Good. When I took a quick glance into the mirror, he was smiling again. I wanted to ask him if being rich and famous and helping to direct the school to become what it wasn't enough, but I was afraid. What do you think of my idea, young man? He said. I don't know, sir. I only think that you have what you're looking for. Because if I fail or leave school, it doesn't seem to me it would be your fault. Because you helped make the school what it is. And you think that enough? Yes, sir. That's what the president tells us. You have yours, and you got it yourself, and we have to lift ourselves up the same way. But that's only part of it, young man. I have wealth and a reputation and prestige, all that is true. But your great founder had more than that. He had tens of thousands of lives dependent upon his ideas and upon his actions. What he did affected your whole race. In a way, he had the power of a king, or in a sense, of a god. That, I've come to believe, is more important than my own work, because more depends upon you. You are important because if you fail, I have failed by one individual, one defective cog. It didn't matter so much before, but now I'm growing old and it has become very important. But you don't even know my name, I thought, wondering what it was all about. I suppose it is difficult for you to understand how this concerns me. But as you develop, you must remember that I am dependent upon you to learn my fate. Through you and your fellow students I become, let us say, 300 teachers, 700 trained mechanics, 800 skilled farmers, and so on. That way I can observe in terms of living personalities to what extent my money, my time and my hopes have been fruitfully invested. I also construct a living memorial to my daughter. Understand? I can see the fruits produced by the land that your great founder has transformed from barren clay to fertile soil. His voice ceased and I saw the strands of pale blue smoke drifting across the mirror and heard the electric lighter snap back on its cable into place behind the back of the seat. I think I understand you better, now, sir, I said. Very good, my boy. Shall I continue in this direction, sir? By all means, he said, looking out at the countryside. I've never seen this section before. It's new territory for me. Half-consciously I followed the white line as I drove, thinking about what he had said. Then as we took a hill we were swept by a wave of scorching air and it was as though we were approaching a desert. It almost took my breath away and I leaned over and switched on the fan, hearing its sudden whir. Thank you, he said as a slight breeze filled the car. We were passing a collection of shacks and log cabins now, bleached white and warped by the weather. Sun-tortured shingles lay on the roofs like decks of water-soaked cards spread out to dry. The houses consisted of 2 square rooms joined together by a common floor and roof with a porch in between. As we passed we could look through to the fields beyond. I stopped the car at his excited command in front of a house set off from the rest. Is that a log cabin? It was an old cabin with its chinks filled with chalk-white clay, with bright new shingles patching its roof. Suddenly I was sorry that I had blundered down this road. I recognized the place as soon as I saw the group of children in stiff new overalls who played near a rickety fence. Yes, sir. It is a log cabin, I said. It was the cabin of Jim Trueblood, a sharecropper who had brought disgrace upon the black community. Several months before he had caused quite a bit of outrage up at the school, and now his name was never mentioned above a whisper. Even before that he had seldom come near the campus but had been well liked as a hard worker who took good care of his family's needs, and as one who told the old stories with a sense of humor and a magic that made them come alive. He was also a good tenor singer, and sometimes when special white guests visited the school he was brought up along with the members of a country quartet to sing what the officials called their primitive spirituals when we assembled in the chapel on Sunday evenings. We were embarrassed by the earthy harmonies they sang, but since the visitors were odd we dared not laugh at the crude, High, plaintively animal sounds Jim Trueblood made as he led the quartet. That had all passed now with his disgrace, and what on the part of the school officials had been an attitude of contempt blunted by tolerance, had now become a contempt sharpened by hate. I didn't understand in those pre-invisible days that their hate, and mine too, was charged with fear. How all of us at the college hated the black belt people, the peasants, during those days. We were trying to lift them up and they, like Trueblood, did everything it seemed to pull us down. It appears quite old, Mr. Norton said, looking across the bare, hard stretch of yard where two women dressed in new blue and white checked ginghams were washing clothes in an iron pot. The pot was soot black and the feeble flames that licked its sides showed pale pink and bordered with black, like flames in morning. Both women moved with the weary, full-fronted motions of far-gone pregnancy. "It is, sir," I said. "That one and the other two like it were built during slavery times." "You don't say?" "I would never have believed that they were so enduring." "Since slavery times." "That's true, sir. And the white family that owned the land when it was a big plantation still lives in town." "Yes," he said, "I know that many of the old families still survive. And individuals too, the human stock goes on, even though it degenerates. But these cabins," he seemed surprised and confounded. "Do you suppose those women know anything about the age and history of the place?" The older one looks as though she might. "I doubt it, sir. They don't seem very bright." "Bright?" he said, removing his cigar. "You mean that they wouldn't talk with me?" he asked suspiciously. "Yes, sir. That's it." "Why not?" I didn't want to explain. It made me feel ashamed, but he sensed that I knew something and pressed me. "It's not very nice, sir. But I don't think those women would talk to us. We can explain that we're from the school." "Surely they'll talk then." "You may tell them who I am." "Yes, sir," I said, "but they hate us up at the school. They never come there." "What?" "No, sir." "And those children along the fence down there?" "They don't either, sir." "But why?" "I don't really know, sir. Quite a few folks out this way don't, though. I guess they're too ignorant. They're not interested." But I can't believe it. The children had stopped playing and now looked silently at the car, their arms behind their backs and their new oversized overalls pulled tight over their little pot bellies as though they too were pregnant. "What about their men folk?" I hesitated. Why did he find this so strange? "He hates us, sir," I said. "You say he, aren't both the women married?" I caught my breath. I'd made a mistake. "The old one is, sir," I said reluctantly. "What happened to the young woman's husband?" "She doesn't have any, that is." What is it, young man? Do you know these people?" "Only a little, sir. There was some talk about them up on the campus a while back." "What talk?" "Well, the young woman is the old woman's daughter." "Aunt?" "Well, sir, they say. You see. I mean they say the daughter doesn't have a husband." "Oh, I see. But that shouldn't be so strange. I understand that your people, never mind." "Is that all?" "Well, sir." "Yes, what else?" "They say that her father did it." "What?" "Yes, sir. That he gave her the baby." I heard the sharp intake of breath, like a toy balloon suddenly deflated. His face reddened. I was confused, feeling shame for the two women and fear that I had talked too much and offended his sensibilities. "And did anyone from the school investigate this matter?" he asked at last. "Yes, sir," I said. "What was discovered?" "That it was true, they say." "But how does he explain his doing such such a monstrous thing?" He sat back in the seat, his hands grasping his knees, his knuckles bloodless. I looked away, down the heat-dazzling concrete of the highway. I wished we were back on the other side of the white line, heading back to the quiet green stretch of the campus. "It is said that the man took both his wife and his daughter?" "Yes, sir." "And that he is the father of both their children?" "Yes, sir." No. He sounded as though he were in great pain. I looked at him anxiously. What had happened? What had I said? Not that. No. He said, with something like horror. I saw the sun blaze upon the new blue overalls as the man appeared around the cabin. His shoes were tan and new and he moved easily over the hot hearth. He was a small man and he covered the yard with a familiarity that would have allowed him to walk in the blackest darkness with the same certainty. He came and said something to the women as he fanned himself with a blue bandana handkerchief. But they appeared to regard him sullenly, barely speaking, and hardly looking in his direction. Would that be the man? Mr. Norton asked. Yes, sir. I think so. Get out! He cried. I must talk with him. I was unable to move. I felt surprise and a dread and resentment of what he might say to Trueblood and his women, the questions he might ask. Why couldn't he leave them alone? Hurry! I climbed from the car and opened the rear door. He clambered out and almost ran across the road to the yard, as though compelled by some pressing urgency which I could not understand. Then suddenly I saw the two women turn and run frantically behind the house, their movements heavy and flat-footed. I hurried behind him, seeing him stop when he reached the man and the children. They became silent, their faces clouding over, their features becoming soft and negative, their eyes bland and deceptive. They were crouching behind their eyes waiting for him to speak, just as I recognized that I was trembling behind my own. Up close I saw what I had not seen from the car. The man had a scar on his right cheek, as though he had been hit in the face with a sledge. The wound was raw and moist and from time to time he lifted his handkerchief to fan away the gnats. I, Mr. Norton stammered, I must talk with you. All right, Sue, Jim Trueblood said without surprise and waited. Is it true? I mean, did you? Sue? Trueblood asked, as I looked away. You have survived, he blurted. But is it true? Sue? The farmer said, his brow wrinkling with bewilderment. I'm sorry, sir, I said, but I don't think he understands you. He ignored me, staring into Trueblood's face as though reading a message there which I could not perceive. You did and are unharmed. He shouted, his blue eyes blazing into the black face with something like envy and indignation. Trueblood looked helplessly at me. I looked away. I understood no more than he. You have looked upon chaos and are not destroyed. No, Sue. I feels all right. You do? You feel no inner turmoil, no need to cast out the offending eye? Sue? Answer me. I'm all right, Sue, Trueblood said uneasily. My eyes is all right too. And when I feels Polly in my gut I takes a little soda and it goes away. No. Let us go where there is shade, he said, looking about excitedly and going swiftly to where the porch cast a swath of shade. We followed him. The farmer placed his hand on my shoulder, but I shook it off, knowing that I could explain nothing. We sat on the porch in a semicircle in camp chairs, me between the sharecropper and the millionaire. The earth around the porch was hard and white from where washwater had long been thrown. How are you faring now? Mr. Norton asked. Perhaps I could help. We ain't doing so bad, Sue. For they heard 'bout what happened to us out here. I couldn't get no help from nobody. Now lot of folks is curious and goes out of they way to help. Even the biggity school folks up on the hill, only there was a catch to it. They offered to send us clean out of the county, pay our way and everything and give me $100 to get settled with. But we likes it here so I told him no. Then they sent a fellow out here, a big fellow too, and he said if I didn't leave they was going to turn the white folks loose on me. It made me mad and it made me scared. Them folks up there to the school is in strong with the white folks and that scared me. But I thought when they first come out here that they was different from when I went up there a long time ago looking for some book learning and some points on how to handle my crops. That was when I had my own place. I thought they was trying to help me, on account I got 2 women due to birth 'bout the same time. But I got mad when I found they was trying to get rid of us 'cause they said we was a disgrace. Yes I got real mad. So I went down to see Mr. Buchanan, the boss man, and I told him about it and he give me a note to the sheriff and told me to take it to him. I did that, like he told me. I went to the jailhouse and give Sheriff Barber the note and he asked me to tell him what happened, and I told him and he called in some more men and they made me tell it again. They wanted to hear about the gal lots of times and they gimme something to eat and drink and some tobacco. Surprised me, 'cause I was scared and 'spectin' something different. Why, I guess there ain't a colored man in the county who ever got to take so much of the white folks' time as I did. So finally they tell me not to worry, that they was going to send word up to the school that I was to stay right where I am. Them big niggas didn't bother me, neither. It just goes to show you that no matter how biggity an it gets, the white folks can always cut him down. The white folks took up for me. And the white folks took to coming out here to see us and talk with us. Some of them was big white folks, too, from the big school way across the state. Asked me lots about what I thought about things, and about my folks and the kids, and wrote it all down in a book. But best of all, Sue, I got more work now than I ever did have before. He talked willingly now, with a kind of satisfaction and no trace of hesitancy or shame. The old man listened with a puzzled expression as he held an unlit cigar in his delicate fingers. "Things is pretty good now," the farmer said. "Every time I think of how cold it was and what a hard time we was having I gets the shakes." I saw him bite into a plug of chewing tobacco. Something tinkled against the porch and I picked it up, gazing at it from time to time. It was a hard red apple stamped out of tin. "You see, Sue, it was cold and us didn't have much fire. Nothing but wood, no coal. I tried to get help but wouldn't nobody help us and I couldn't find no work or nothing. It was so cold all of us had to sleep together, me, the ole lady and the gal. That's how it started, Sue." He cleared his throat, his eyes gleaming and his voice taking on a deep, incantatory quality, as though he had told the story many, many times. Flies and fine white gnats swarmed about his wound. "That's the way it was," he said. "Me on one side and the ole lady on the other and the gal in the middle. It was dark, plumb black. Black as the middle of a bucket of tar. The kids was sleeping all together in they bed over in the corner. I must have been the last one to go to sleep, 'cause I was thinking 'bout how to get some grub for the next day and 'bout the gal and the young boy what was startin' to hang round her. I didn't like him and he kept comin' through my thoughts and I made up my mind to warn him away from the gal. It was black dark and I heard one of the kids whimper in his sleep and the last few sticks of kindlin' crackin' and settlin' in the stove and the smell of the fat meat seemed to get cold and still in the air just like meat grease when it gets set in a cold plate of molasses. And I was thinkin' 'bout the gal and this boy and feelin' her arms besides me and hearing the ole lady snorin' with a kind of moanin' and a groanin' on the other side. I was worryin' 'bout my family, how they was goin' to eat and all, and I thought 'bout when the gal was little like the young guns sleepin' over in the corner and how I was her favorite over the ole lady. There we was breathin' together in the dark. Only I could see 'em in my mind, knowin' 'em like I do. In my mind I looked at all of them, one by one. The gal looks just like the ole lady did when she was young and I first met her, only better lookin'. You know, we gettin' to be a better lookin' race of people. Anyway, I could hear 'em breathin' and though I hadn't been it made me sleepy. Then I heard the gal say, "Daddy," soft and low in her sleep and I looked, tryin' to see if she was still awake. But all I can do is smell her and feel her breath on my hand when I go to touch her. She said it so soft I couldn't be sure I had heard anything, so I just laid there listenin'. Seems like I heard a whippoorwill callin', and I thought to myself, go on away from here, we'll whip-poll-a-will when we find him. Then I heard the clock up there at the school strikin' 4 times, lonesome like. Then I got to thinkin' 'bout way back when I left the farm and went to live in Mobile and 'bout a gal I had me then. I was young then, like this young fellow here. Us lived in a 2-story house longside the river, and at night in the summertime we used to lay in bed and talk, and after she'd gone off to sleep I'd be awake lookin' out at the lights comin' up from the water and listenin' to the sounds of the boats movin' along. They used to have musicianers on them boats, and sometimes I used to wake her up to hear the music when they come up the river. I'd be layin' there and it would be quiet and I could hear it comin' from way, way off. Like when you quail huntin' and it's getting dark and you can hear the boss bird whistlin' tryin' to get the covey together again, and he's coming toward you slow and whistlin' soft, 'cause he knows you somewhere around with your gun. Still he got to round them up, so he keeps on comin'. Them boss quails is like a good man, what he got to do he do. Well, that's the way the boats used to sound. Comin' close to you from far away. First one would be comin' to you when you almost sleep and it sounded like somebody hittin' at you slow with a big shiny pick. You see the pick point comin' straight at you, comin' slow too, and you can't dodge, only when it goes to hit you it ain't no pick at all but somebody far away breakin' little bottles of all kinds of colored glass. It's still comin' at you though. Still comin'. Then you hear it close up, like when you up in the second-story window and look down on a wagon full of watermelons, and you see one of them young juicy melons split wide open layin' all spread out and cool and sweet on top of all the striped green ones like it's waitin' just for you, so you can see how red and ripe and juicy it is and all the shiny black seeds it's got and all. And you could hear the side wheels splashin' like they don't want to wake nobody up, and us, me and the gal, would lay there feelin' like we was rich folks and them boys on the boats would be playin' sweet as good peach brandy wine. Then the boats would be past and the lights would be gone from the window and the music would be gone too. Kinda like when you watch a gal in a red dress and a wide straw hat goin' past you down a lane with the trees on both sides, and she's plump and juicy and kinda switchin' her tail 'cause she knows you watchin' and you know she know. And you just stands there and watches till you can't see nothing but the top of her red hat and then that goes and you know she done dropped behind a hill. I seen me a gal like that once. All I could hear then would be that mobile gal, name of Margaret, she be breathin' beside me, and maybe 'bout that time she'd say, "Daddy, you still awake?" And then I'd grunt, "You and drop on off, gentmans," Jim Trueblood said. I likes to recall them mobile days. Well, it was like that when I heard Matty Lou say, "Daddy," and I knowed she must have been dreamin' 'bout somebody from the way she said it and I gets mad wonderin' if it's that boy. I listened to her mumblin' for a while tryin' to hear if she calls his name, but she don't, and I remember that they say if you put the hand of a person who's talkin' in his sleep in warm water he'll say it all, but the water is too cold and I wouldn't have done it anyway. But I'm realizin' that she's a woman now, when I feels her turn and squirm against me and throw her arm across my neck, up where the cover didn't reach and I was cold. She said something I couldn't understand, like a woman says when she wants to tease and please a man. I knowed then she was grown and I wondered how many times it had done happened and was it that doggone boy. I moved her arm and it was soft, but it didn't wake her, so I called her, but that didn't wake her neither. Then I turned my back and tried to move away, though there wasn't much room and I could still feel her touchin' me, movin' close to me. Then I must have dropped into the dream. I have to tell you about that dream. I looked at Mr. Norton and stood up, thinking that now was a good time to leave, but he was listening to Trueblood so intensely he didn't see me, and I sat down again, cursing the farmer silently. To hell with his dream. I don't quite remember it all, but I remember that I was lookin' for some fat meat. I went to the white folks downtown and they said go see Mr. Broadnax, that he'd give it to me. Well, he lives up on a hill and I was climbin' up there to see him. Seems like that was the highest hill in the world. The more I climbed the farther away Mr. Broadnax's house seems to get. But finally I do reach there. And I'm so tired and restless to get to the man, I goes through the front door. I knows it's wrong, but I can't help it. I goes in and I'm standin' in a big room full of lighted candles and shiny furniture and pictures on the walls, and soft stuff on the floor. But I don't see a livin' soul. So I calls his name, but still don't nobody come and don't nobody answer. So I sees a door and goes through that door and I'm in a big white bedroom, like I seen one time when I was a little ol' boy and went to the big house with my ma. Everything in the room was white and I'm standing there knowing I got no business in there, but there anyhow. It's a woman's room too. I tries to get out, but I don't find the door, and all around me I can smell woman, can smell it getting stronger all the time. Then I looks over in a corner and sees one of them tall grandfather clocks and I hears it striking and the glass door is opening and a white lady is stepping out of it. She got on a nightgown of soft white silky stuff and nothing else, and she looks straight at me. I don't know what to do. I wants to run, but the only door I see is the one in the clock she's standing in, and anyway, I can't move and this here clock is keeping up a heap of racket. It's getting faster and faster all the time. I tries to say something, but I can't. Then she starts to screaming and I thinks I done gone deaf, 'cause though I can see her mouth working, I don't hear nothing. Yet I can still hear the clock and I tries to tell her I'm just looking for Mr. Broadnecks but she don't hear me. Instead she runs up and grabs me around the neck and holds tight, trying to keep me out of the clock. I don't know what to do then, shown off. I tries to talk to her, and I tries to get away. But she's holding me and I'm scared to touch her 'cause she's white. Then I gets so scared that I throws her on the bed and tries to break her hold. That woman just seemed to sink out of sight, that there bed was so soft. It's sinking down so far I think it's going to smother both of us. Then swoosh. All of a sudden a flock of little white geese flies out of the bed like they say you see when you go to dig for buried money. Lord. They hadn't no more'n disappeared than I heard a door open and Mr. Broadnecks's voice said, "They just niggas, leave 'em do it." How can he tell this to white men, I thought, when he knows they'll say that all Negroes do such things. I looked at the floor, a red mist of anguish before my eyes. And I can't stop, although I got a feeling something is wrong. I get loose from the woman now and I'm running for the clock. At first I couldn't get the door open, it had some kinda crinkly stuff like steel wool on the facing. But I gets it open and gets inside and it's hot and dark in there. I goes up a dark tunnel, up near where the machinery is making all that noise and heat. It's like the power plant they got up to the school. It's burning hot as fin the house was caught on fire, and I starts to runnin', tryin' to get out. I runs and runs till I should be tired but ain't tired but feelin' more rested as I runs, and runnin' so good it's like flyin' and I'm flyin' and sailin' and floatin' right up over the town. Only I'm still in the tunnel. Then way up ahead I sees a bright light like a jack-o'-lantern over a graveyard. It gets brighter and I know I got to catch up with it or else. Then all at once I was right up with it and it burst like a great big electric light in my eyes and scalded me all over. Only it wasn't a scald, but like I was drowning in a lake where the water was hot on the top and had cold numbing currents down under it. Then all at once I'm through it and I'm relieved to be out and in the cool daylight again. I wakes up intending to tell the ole lady 'bout my crazy dream. Morning done come, and it's getting almost light. And there I am, looking straight in Mattie Lou's face and she's beatin' me and scratchin' and tremblin' and shakin' and cryin' all at the same time like she's having a fit. I'm too surprised to move. She's cryin', "Daddy, Daddy, oh Daddy," just like that. And all at once I remember the ole lady. She's right beside us snorin' and I can't move 'cause I figures if I moved it would be a sin and I figures too, that if I don't move it maybe ain't no sin, 'cause it happened when I was asleep, although maybe sometimes a man can look at a little ole pigtail gal and see him a whore, you all know that? Anyway, I realizes that if I don't move the ole lady will see me. I don't want that to happen. That would be worse than sin. I'm whisperin' to Mattie Lou, trying to keep her quiet and I'm figuring how to get myself out of the fix I'm in without sinning. I almost chokes her. But once a man gets hisself in a tight spot like that there ain't much he can do. It ain't up to him no longer. There I was, trying to get away with all my might, yet having to move without moving. I flew in but I had to walk out. I had to move without moving. I done thought 'bout it since a heap. And when you think right hard you see that that's the way things is always been with me. That's just about been my life. There was only one way I can figure that I could get out, that was with a knife. But I didn't have no knife, and if you all ever seen them geld them young boar pigs in the fall, you know I knowed that that was too much to pay to keep from sinnin'. Everything was happenin' inside of me like a fight was going on. Then just the very thought of the fix Simon puts the iron back in me. Then if that ain't bad enough, Matty Lou can't hold out no longer and gets to movin' herself. First she was tryin' to push me away and I'm tryin' to hold her down to keep from sinnin'. Then I'm pullin' away and shushin' her to be quiet so's not to wake her ma, when she grabs hold to me and holds tight. She didn't want me to go then, and to tell the honest to God truth I found out that I didn't want to go neither. I guess I felt then, at that time, and although I've been sorry since, just about like that fellow did down in Birmingham. That one what locked hisself in his house and shot at them police until they set fire to the house and burned him up. I was lost. The more wringlin' and twistin' we done tryin' to get away, the more we wanted to stay. So like that fellow, I stayed. I had to fight it on out to the end. He might a died, but I suspects now that he got a heap of satisfaction before he went. I know there ain't nothin' like what I went through, I can't tell how it was. It's like when a real drinkin' man gets drunk, or when a real sanctified religious woman gets so worked up she jumps out of her clothes, or when a real gamblin' man keeps on gamblin' when he's losin'. You got hold to it and you can't let go even though you want to. Mr. Norton, sir, I said in a choked voice, it's time we were getting back to the campus. You miss your appointments. He didn't even look at me. Please, he said, waving his hand in annoyance. True blood seemed to smile at me behind his eyes as he looked from the white man to me and continued. I couldn't even let go when I heard Kate scream. It was a scream to make your blood run cold. It sounds like a woman who was watching a team of wild horses run down her baby Chili and she can't move. Kate's hair is standin' up like she done seen a ghost, her gown is hanging open and the veins in her neck is bout to bust. And her eyes. Lord, them eyes. I'm lookin' up at her from where I'm layin' on the pallet with Matty Lou, and I'm too weak to move. She screams and starts to pickin' up the first thing that comes to her hand and throwin' it. Some of them misses me and some of them hits me. Little things and big things. Somethin' cold and strong stinkin' hits me and wets me and bangs against my head. Somethin' hits the wall, boom-a-loom-a-loom, like a cannonball, and I tries to cover up my head. Kate's talkin' the unknown tongue, like a wild woman. Wait a minute, Kate, I says. Stop it. Then I hears her stop a second and I hears her runnin' across the floor, and I twists and looks and Lord, she done got my double-barrel shotgun. And while she's foamin' at the mouth and cockin' the gun, she gets her speech. Get up. Get up. She says. Hey. Nah. Kate. I says. God damn yo soul to hell. Get up off of my Chili. But woman, Kate, listen. Don't talk, move. Down that thing, Kate. No down, up. That there's buckshot, woman, buckshot. Yes, it is. Down it, I say. I'm gon' blast your soul to hell. You gon' hit Matty Lou. Not Matty Lou, you. It spreads, Kate. Matty Lou. She moves around, aimin' at me. I done warn you, Jim. Kate, it was a dream. Listen to me. You the one who listen, up from there. She jerks the gun and I shuts my eyes. But instead of thunder and lightnin' bustin' me, I hears Matty Lou scream in my ear, Mama. Oh, Mama. I rolls almost over then and Kate hesitates. She looks at the gun, and she looks at us, and she shivers a minute like she got the fever. Then all at once she drops the gun, and zip. Quick as a cat, she turns and grabs something off the stove. It catches me like somebody diggin' into my side with a sharp spade. I can't breathe. She's throwin' and talkin' all at the same time. And when I looks up, man, she's got a iron in her hand. I hollers, no blood, Kate. Don't spill no blood. You low down dog, she says, it's better to spill than to foul. Nah, Kate. Things ain't what they pair. Don't make no blood sin on account of no dream sin. Shut up, nig. You done fouled. But I sees there ain't no use reasonin' with her then. I makes up my mind that I'm going to take whatever she gimme. It seems to me that all I can do is take my punishment. I tell myself, maybe if you suffer for it, it will be best. Maybe you owe it to Kate to let her beat you. You ain't guilty, but she thinks you is. You don't want her to beat you, but she thinks she got to beat you. You want to get up, but you too weak to move. I was too. I was frozen to where I was like a young gun what done stuck his lip to a pump handle in the winter time. I was just like a jaybird that the yellow jackets done stung till he's paralyzed, but still alive in his eyes and he's watchin' him sting his body to death. It made me seem to go way back a distance in my head, behind my eyes, like I was standin' behind a windbreak during a storm. I looks out and sees Kate running toward me drawin' something behind her. I tries to see what it is 'cause I'm curious about it and sees her gown catch on the stove and her hand comin' in sight with something in it. I thinks to myself, it's a handle. What she got the handle to? Then I sees her right up on me, big. She's swingin' her arms like a man swingin' a 10-pound sledge and I sees the knuckles of her hand is bruised and bleedin', and I sees it catch in her gown and I sees her gown go up so I can see her thighs and I sees how rusty and gray the cold done made her skin, and I sees her bend and straightenin' up and I hears her grunt and I sees her swing and I smells her sweat and I knows by the shape of the shinin' wood what she's got to put on me. Lord, yes. I sees it catch on a quilt this time and raise that quilt up and drop it on the floor. Then I sees that axe come free. It's shinin' from the sharpenin' I'd give it a few days before, and man, way back in myself, behind that windbreak, I says, "Nah. Kate, Lord, Kate, nah." Suddenly his voice was so strident that I looked up startled. True blood seemed to look straight through Mr. Norton, his eyes glassy. The children paused guiltily at their play, looking toward their father. "I might as well been pleadin' with a switch engine," he went on. "I sees it comin' down. I sees the light catchin' on it, I sees Kate's face all mean and I tightens my shoulders and stiffens my neck and I waits, 10 million back-breakin' years, it seems to me like I waits. I waits so long I remembers all the wrong things I ever done. I waits so long I opens my eyes and closes 'em and opens my eyes again, and I sees it fallin'. It's fallin' fast as flops from a 6-foot ox, and while I'm waitin' I feels somethin' wind up inside of me and turn to water. I sees it, Lord, yes. I sees it and seen it I twists my head aside. Couldn't help it, Kate has a good aim, but for that. I moves. Though I meant to keep still, I moved. Anybody but Jesus Christ hisself would 'a' moved. I feel like the whole side of my face is smashed clear off. It hits me like hot lead so hot that instead of burnin' me it numbs me. I'm layin' there on the floor, but inside me I'm runnin' round in circles like a dog with his back broke, and back into that numbness with my tail tucked between my legs. I feels like I don't have no skin on my face no more, only the naked bone. But this is the part I don't understand, more in the pain and numbness I feels relief. Yes, and to get some more of that relief I seems to run out from behind the windbreak again and up to where Kate's standin' with the axe, and I opens my eyes and waits. That's the truth. I wants some more and I waits. I sees her swing it, lookin' down on me, and I sees it in the air and I holds my breath. Then all of a sudden I sees it stop like somebody done reached down through the roof and caught it, and I sees her face have a spasm and I sees the axe fall, back of her this time, and hit the floor, and Kate spews out some puke and I close my eyes and waits. I can hear her moanin' and stumblin' out of the door and fallin' off the porch into the yard. Then I hears her pukin' like all her guts is coming up by the roots. Then I looks down and seen blood runnin' all over Matty Lou. It's my blood, my face is bleedin'. That gets me to move on. I gets up and stumbles out to find Kate, and there she is under the cottonwood tree out there, on her knees, and she's moanin'. What have I done, Lord? What have I done? She's droolin' green stuff and gets to pukin' again, and when I goes to touch her it gets worse. I stands there holdin' my face and tryin' to keep the blood from flowin' and wonders what on earth is gonna happen. I looks up at the mornin' sun and expects somehow for it to thunder. But it's already bright and clear and the sun comin' up and the birds is chirpin' and I gets more afraid than if a bolt of lightnin' had struck me. I yells, "Have mercy, Lord! Lord, have mercy!" And waits. And there's nothin' but the clear bright mornin' sun. But don't nothin' happen and I knows then that somethin' worse than anything I ever heard 'bout is in store for me. I must have stood there stark stone still for half an hour. I was still standin' there when Kate got off her knees and went back into the house. The blood was runnin' all over my clothes and the flies was after me, and I went back inside to try and stop it. When I see Mattie Lou stretched out there I think she's dead. Ain't no color in her face and she ain't hardly breathin'. She gray in the face. I tries to help her but I can't do no good and Kate won't speak to me nor look at me even. And I thinks maybe she plans to try to kill me again, but she don't. I'm in such a daze I just sits there the whole time while she bundles up the young guns and takes 'em down the road to Will Nichols. I can see but I can't do nothin'. And I'm still settin' there when she comes back with some women to see 'bout Mattie Lou. Won't nobody speak to me, though they looks at me like I'm some new kinda cotton pickin' machine. I feels bad. I tells them how it happened in a dream. But they scorns me. I gets plumb out of the house then. I goes to see the preacher and even he don't believe me. He tells me to get out at his house, that I'm the most wicked man he's ever seen and that I better go confess my sin and make my peace with God. I leaves tryin' to pray, but I can't. I thinks and thinks, until I thinks my brain goin' bust, 'bout how I'm guilty and how I ain't guilty. I don't eat nothin' and I don't drink nothin' and can't sleep a night. Finally, one night, way early in the mornin', I looks up and sees the stars and I starts singin'. I don't mean to, I didn't think 'bout it, just start singin'. I don't know what it was, some kinda church song, I guess. All I know is I ends up singin' the blues. I sings me some blues that night ain't never been sang before. And while I'm singin' them blues I makes up my mind that I ain't nobody but myself and ain't nothin' I can do but let whatever is gonna happen, happen. I made up my mind that I was goin' back home and face Kate, yeah, and face Mattie Lou too. When I gets here everybody thinks I done run off. There's a heap of women here with Kate and I runs 'em out. And when I runs 'em out I sends the young guns out to play and locks the door and tells Kate and Mattie Lou 'bout the dream and how I'm sorry, but that what done happen is done happen. How come you don't go on way and leave us? Is the first words Kate says to me. Ain't you done enough to me and this chili? I can't leave you, I says. I'm a man and man don't leave his family. She says, nah, you ain't no man. No man do what you did. I'm still a man, I says. But what you gon' do after it happens? Says Kate. After what happens? I says. When yo black abomination is birthed to ball yo wicked sin before the eyes of God. She must a learned them words from the preacher, birth? I says. Who birth? Both of us. Me birth and Mattie Lou birth. Both of us birth, you dirty low-down wicked dog. That like it killed me. I can understand then why Mattie Lou won't look at me and won't speak a word to nobody. If you stay I'm going over and get Aunt Chloe for both of us, Kate says. She says, I don't aim to birth no sin for folks to look at all the rest of my life, and I don't aim for Mattie Lou to neither. You see, Aunt Chloe is a midwife, and even weak as I am from this news I knows I don't want her foolin' with my women folks. That would have been pilin' sin up on top of sin. So I told Kate, nah, that if Aunt Chloe come near this house I'd kill her, old as she is. They done it too. That settles it. I walks out of the house and leaves 'em here to cry it out between 'em. I wanted to go off by myself again, but it don't do no good tryin' to run off from something like that. It follows you wherever you go. Besides, to get right down to the facts, there wasn't nowhere I could go. I didn't have a cryin' dime. Things got to happen and right off. The niggas up at the school come down to chase me off and that made me mad. I went to see the white folks then and they gave me help. That's what I don't understand. I done the worst thing a man could ever do in his family, and instead of chasing me out of the county, they give me more help than they ever give any other colored man, no matter how good a nig he was. Except that my wife and daughter won't speak to me, I'm better off than I ever been before. And even if Kate won't speak to me, she took the new clothes I brought her from up in town and now she's getting some eyeglasses made what she been needin' for so long. But what I don't understand is how I done the worst thing a man can do in his own family, and instead of things getting bad, they got better. The niggas up at the school don't like me, but the white folks treats me fine. He was some farmer. As I listened, I had been so torn between humiliation and fascination that to lessen my sense of shame I had kept my attention riveted upon his intense face. That way I did not have to look at Mr. Norton. But now as the voice ended I sat looking down at Mr. Norton's feet. Out in the yard a woman's hoarse contralto intoned a hymn. Children's voices were raised in playful chatter. I sat bent over, smelling the sharp dry odor of wood burning in the hot sunlight. I stared at the two pairs of shoes before me. Mr. Norton's were white, trimmed with black. They were custom-made, and there beside the cheap tan brogues of the farmer they had the elegantly slender well-bred appearance of fine gloves. Finally someone cleared his throat and I looked up to see Mr. Norton staring silently into Jim Trueblood's eyes. I was startled. His face had drained of color. With his bright eyes burning into Trueblood's black face, he looked ghostly. Trueblood looked at me questioningly. "Listen to the young guns," he said in embarrassment. "Playin' London Bridge's fallen down." Something was going on which I didn't get. I had to get Mr. Norton away. "Are you all right, sir?" I asked. He looked at me with unseeing eyes. "All right?" he said. "Yes, sir. I mean that I think it's time for the afternoon session," I hurried on. He stared at me blankly. I went to him. "Are you sure you're all right, sir?" "Maybe it's the heat," Trueblood said. "You got to be born down here to stand this kind of heat." "Perhaps," Mr. Norton said, "it is the heat. We'd better go." He stood shakily, still staring intently at Trueblood. Then I saw him removing a red Moroccan leather wallet from his coat pocket. The platinum-framed miniature came with it, but he did not look at it this time. "Here," he said, extending a banknote. "Please take this and buy the children some toys for me." Trueblood's mouth fell agape, his eyes widened and filled with moisture as he took the bill between trembling fingers. It was $100 bill. "I'm ready, young man," Mr. Norton said, his voice a whisper. I went before him to the car and opened the door. He stumbled a bit climbing in and I gave him my arm. His face was still chalk white. "Drive me away from here," he said in a sudden frenzy. "Away?" "Yes, sir." I saw Jim Trueblood wave as I threw the car into gear. "You bastard," I said under my breath. "You no good bastard. You get $100 bill." When I had turned the car and started back, I saw him still standing in the same place. Suddenly Mr. Norton touched me on the shoulder. "I must have a stimulant, young man." "A little whiskey?" "Yes, sir." "Are you all right, sir?" "A little faint, but a stimulant." His voice trailed off. Something cold formed within my chest. If anything happened to him, Dr. Bledsoe would blame me. I stepped on the gas, wondering where I could get him some whiskey. Not in the town, that would take too long. There was only one place, the Golden Day. "I'll have you some in a few minutes, sir," I said. "As soon as you can," he said.